Possession. Kerasukan is a bold and polarizing entry in the world of Indonesian horror cinema. Directed by Razka Robby Ertanto and inspired by Andrzej Żuławski's cult classic Possession, the film dives deep into the toxic dynamics of a crumbling marriage, reframing themes of control, intimacy, and trauma within a supernatural lens. But does it succeed in delivering a haunting narrative, or does it falter under the weight of its ambition? In this video, we'll break down the story, examine its chilling climax, and answer the burning question: is Faris really dead? The Loveless Marriage, Faris and Ratna. At its core, Possession. Kerasukan is more than just a supernatural thriller. It's a searing critique of a toxic marriage. Faris, a Navy officer, and Ratna, a struggling playwright, are stuck in a loveless, suffocating union. Faris is domineering, entitled, and unwilling to let go of the control he exerts over his wife. Ratna, on the other hand, is emotionally drained, desperate to escape, and seeking solace in her creative pursuits. Their young son, Budi, becomes collateral damage, ignored and left to bear witness to the horrors unfolding around him. When Ratna declares her intention to divorce Faris, his fragile ego shatters. Instead of introspection, Faris spirals into paranoia, suspecting her of infidelity. But as the film unfolds, it becomes clear that Ratna's emotional distance isn't due to an affair with another man. It's because she's fallen under the influence of a supernatural entity. And, shockingly, she welcomes it. A ghostly lover and Ratna's descent. The turning point of the film is Ratna's connection with the ghostly pocong. Unlike Faris, the ghost respects her autonomy, or at least, that's how she perceives it. In one of the film's most disturbing twists, Ratna embraces the ghost as her lover, finding in it a comfort and passion that Faris could never provide. Through this spectral relationship, Ratna gains a sense of power and control, even as it drives her further into darkness. The ghost doesn't just satisfy her emotionally and physically, it also becomes an enforcer of her unspoken rage. When Ratna encounters men who exploit or objectify her, be it a predatory taxi driver or the lecherous private detective hired by Faris, the ghost exacts brutal vengeance on her behalf. These moments are both cathartic and horrifying, as Ratna's psyche becomes increasingly fractured. The detective and the deadly consequences. One of the film's more unsettling scenes involves the private detective. Sent by Faris to uncover Ratna's supposed affair, the detective quickly reveals himself to be yet another predatory figure. Instead of simply doing his job, he attempts to assault Ratna, but he underestimates her and her ghostly companion. Together, Ratna and the pocong unleash a visceral, violent punishment, stabbing the detective repeatedly in a shocking display of retribution. Possession. Kerasukan is an ambitious and unsettling Indonesian horror film that ventures deep into the psychological and emotional scars of a toxic marriage. Directed by Razka Robby Ertanto, it's a story as much about supernatural horror as it is about the horrors of human relationships. Inspired by Andrzej Żuławski's 1981 film Possession, this movie trades the European art house sensibilities of its predecessor for a more visceral exploration of control, trauma, and empowerment within a cultural and supernatural framework unique to Indonesia. In this video, we'll unpack the movie's complex narrative, dissect its controversial ending, and explore its core themes of possession, both literal and metaphorical. Spoiler alert, we'll be diving into every shocking twist and bloody turn, so if you haven't watched the film yet, consider pausing here and coming back later. A Loveless Marriage, the catalyst for horror. At its core, Possession. Kerasukan is a haunting portrayal of a toxic, crumbling marriage. From the outset, the film establishes the emotional void between Faris, a Navy officer who is frequently absent, and Ratna, an aspiring playwright. Their relationship is devoid of love, trust, or mutual respect. Faris exudes entitlement, believing that Ratna should fulfill her duties as a wife, even when her desires and needs are ignored. Ratna, in turn, is suffocating under the weight of her husband's oppressive control and the societal expectations placed on her as a wife and mother. The couple's young son, Budi, is largely ignored, a tragic casualty of their dysfunction. The moment Ratna tells Faris she wants a divorce, their relationship's toxic underpinnings fully surface. Faris is blindsided and reacts with a mixture of disbelief and rage. He refuses to understand her perspective, instead choosing to believe that her desire to leave stems from an extramarital affair. This suspicion sets off a chain of events that pushes both characters to their breaking points and invites the film's supernatural elements to take hold. The ghost as a lover and liberator. Here's where things get truly unsettling: Ratna's connection with the pocong. For those unfamiliar, a pocong is a figure from Indonesian folklore, essentially the restless spirit of someone who wasn't properly buried. In possession, Kerasukan, the ghost is not an antagonist in the traditional sense. Instead, it becomes an unlikely ally and lover for Ratna, offering her an intimacy and sense of control that her husband never could. This element of the film is deeply provocative. Ratna doesn't just tolerate the ghost's presence, she embraces it. In fact, she seems to actively prefer the ghost over Faris, finding in it a partner who doesn't judge, dominate, or control her. The film's portrayal of her spectral relationship is both eerie and deeply symbolic. For Ratna, the ghost represents a twisted form of liberation. Through it, she finds solace, sexual satisfaction, and, most importantly, power. The ghost even assists her in carrying out acts of vengeance against those who harm or threaten her. This leads to some of the film's most disturbing sequences. One such scene involves a taxi driver who sexually harasses Ratna. The ghost violently punishes him, and Ratna watches with a sense of grim satisfaction. In these moments, the film explores the catharsis of revenge but also delves into the moral ambiguity of Ratna's choices. As she increasingly relies on the ghost to mete out justice, her humanity begins to erode. The private detective's grim fate. Faris, driven by his paranoia, hires a private detective to follow Ratna and uncover evidence of her supposed infidelity. This detective becomes yet another representation of male predation. When he discovers that Ratna is spending time alone in a hotel, he doesn't just report back to Faris. Instead, he decides to take advantage of her vulnerability, attempting to sexually assault her. This moment epitomizes the film's central theme: the pervasive objectification and dehumanization of women by the men around them. But the detective doesn't know what he's walking into. Ratna, with the help of her ghostly ally, turns the tables in a gruesome fashion. She brutally kills the detective, stabbing him repeatedly with scissors in a scene that is both horrifying and darkly empowering. This act of violence marks a turning point for Ratna. She fully embraces her darker impulses, and the line between victim and perpetrator becomes increasingly blurred. The punishment of Mita and Tony. The film doesn't stop at exploring the toxic dynamics between Faris and Ratna. Other characters, like Mita, Ratna's assistant, and Tony, Faris' neighbor, are drawn into the web of lust, betrayal, and supernatural vengeance. Mita's attraction to Faris leads her to make a shocking proposition. She asks Ratna for permission to sleep with her husband. This moment highlights the transactional and dehumanizing ways in which sex and relationships are treated in the film. Ratna, unsurprisingly, refuses. However, Faris later discovers a videotape of Mita discussing the curse on Ratna, implying that Mita may have played a role in summoning the ghost. Tony, meanwhile, harbors his own twisted fantasies about Ratna. When Faris becomes desperate to save Ratna, Tony manipulates the situation to his advantage, suggesting that Ratna be tied to the bed for an exorcism. But his true intentions are soon revealed when he attempts to assault Ratna, only to meet a gruesome end at the hands of the ghost. In both cases, Mita and Tony's punishment feels like the ghost's way of exacting justice on behalf of Ratna. These characters are consumed by their own lust and selfishness, and their fates serve as a brutal condemnation of their actions. The climactic theater scene, Ratna's final act. The film's climax takes place in the theater where Ratna had been working on her play. In a macabre twist, she drags the bodies of her victims, including Faris, to the stage for one final performance. Faris, tied to a chair, is forced to listen as Ratna delivers a chilling monologue. In this moment, Ratna lays bare the film's central message. Men, like Faris, who seek to control and dominate women are the true monsters. She accuses him of treating her as an object, of dehumanizing her, and of embodying the very traits he claimed to despise in others. Then, in an act of ultimate defiance and liberation, she shoots him. Is Faris really dead? Yes, Faris is dead. His death serves as the film's final act of rebellion against patriarchy and control. But his death isn't just about Ratna's personal vendetta. It's symbolic of the broader struggle against systemic oppression. Faris represents the entitlement and toxic masculinity that have kept Ratna, and women like her, trapped for so long. In killing him, Ratna frees herself, though at a terrible cost. Themes and final thoughts. At its heart, possession. Kerasukan is a meditation on control, agency, and the desperate lengths people will go to in order to reclaim their autonomy. It tackles heavy themes like marital rape, domestic violence, and the dehumanization of women, all while weaving in elements of supernatural horror. The film's use of the pocong as both a literal and metaphorical force is particularly effective. On one level, the ghost is a manifestation of Ratna's trauma and rage. On another, it's a critique of the oppressive systems that turn victims into monsters. Ratna's journey is both tragic and empowering, a descent into darkness that ultimately exposes the horrifying realities of her world. However, while the film's themes are undeniably powerful, its execution is uneven. Some of the supernatural elements feel forced, and certain plot devices, like the conveniently placed videotape, come off as contrived. Yet, despite these flaws, Possession, Kerasukan delivers a bold and thought-provoking narrative that lingers long after the credits roll. In the end, Possession, Kerasukan isn't just about ghosts and gore. It's about the haunting legacy of toxic relationships and the desperate, often destructive, quest for liberation. What did you think of the film? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of horror cinema. Until next time, stay curious, stay haunted.